podcast. I'm your host, Hero Shibe, and we have Shawn Wilkinson here of STORJ.
Hello.
And he's going to talk a little bit about STORJ, about a little bit about his history in the tech industry. And Shawn, just to get started, for anyone in the audience who's unfamiliar with STORJ and with you, tell us a little bit about STORJ.
So STORJ is an attempt to merge both Bitcoin and blockchain technologies with data in cloud. So we allow users to sell their extra hard drive space and make a little extra money for that. And on the other side of that, we allow people to store files in a completely encrypted, secure way that they have 100% control over.
Okay, so let's talk about this, because you are, in essence, developing your own blockchain to help get the cloud, in essence, decentralized. What are the biggest aspects of this? Because there's a whole actually storing of the information in the blockchain issue that some people see, and then there's, are you going to have enough people on the network to make this happen?
So we're not actually building our own blockchain. That's a common misconception. We're actually using the Bitcoin blockchain in various capacities.
Okay.
So that was a question that we tried to answer very early on as we were building STORJ, and it simply, Bitcoin and the blockchain structure is not built for storing large amounts of data.
No.
It's built for storing small transactions and other small pieces of information, but there's really not a good data store for storing large amounts of things. I mean, for example, if you were to even go for something like Datacoin that is specifically has a lot bigger transaction sizes to store more data, it would still cost you like $200, $300 to store just like a typical small video file, much less, all your files and media. So it's just not the best structure for it is. What it is good for is keeping track of that information and making sure that information is up to date and secure, and also handling the payments to the various people who are actually holding the data.
Okay.
To your other question about is it big enough, our numbers already show that there's a lot of people out there that have computers and they're only using about half of their space. So when you crunch the numbers, you can store the entire cloud that we use today, Dropbox, Google, Amazon, all these other providers. You could store them many, many times over on just the free excess space of users. So we're pretty convinced that we'll have many, many, many more amount of people than there's actual demand to store the files.
Okay. Well, I also wanted to talk about the fact that your coin is on Shiftshape.io. Have you seen an uptick in people participating now that they have a much easier access to the coin?
It's been about the same. Definitely push Shapeshift a little bit because it definitely makes it easier for users to go in and out of STORJ coin for various test groups. But I think it's going to play a better role as we launch into test group B and other ports of our software, where you might have someone who wants to try out STORJ. They really like the concept and idea, and they want to share it their hard drive, and they need some STORJ coins. Mm-hmm. But they don't necessarily know too much about crypto or Bitcoin. So just being able to have something like that where they just send coins to Ingress and they get what they need, rather than having to sign up for an exchange and understand how that works and go through that whole process, is definitely reduces a lot of steps for new users.
Yes, I found that for me personally, to see that was like a big thumbs up as far as your guys' project is going. It seems like of all the different projects that have been happening within the crypto space, you guys have seemed to be hitting your mark.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of our main primary things that we focus on is this abstraction and ease of use. You know, when you getting your car to drive around, you don't have to know how the engine works and the
No.
spark plugs and all that kind of stuff. You just put in your key, put in drive, and you hit the gas pedal. And some of the other crypto projects, no fault of their own, but they can be quite complex. And so we just want to make it as simple and easy for the users as possible. I mean, when you get on Dropbox or any of these other applications, you just drag and drop and it works. So we think our applications should function the same way, and getting in and out of them should be quite simple and quite easy.
Okay, I wanted to talk about your white paper, particularly the latest one. And what I wanted to talk about is that you right off within the first page, you talk about the NSA and computers in the graph. We just have like a little red circle NSA as a way of demonstrating people how your cloud storage can be intercepted, your information. And I just found that not only very bold, but it's very telling of our times.
Well, yeah, it's definitely an interesting piece, and you don't have to be crazy anarchical, kind of person to say, okay, there's definitely a lot of pushback from just other countries, Germany, France, saying, okay, wait a minute, we're storing sensitive corporate data. We're storing sensitive government information, and we don't want that to be indexed and searched by the surveillance organization of another country, and that's some legitimate concerns. And there's other people who have concerns about their data being private, and so that's one of the core tenets of our architecture and our project, is that not only should we make simple applications where people can drag and drop their files and move them around very easily, it also should be secure and private, and you should be able to be the only one who can gain access to those files and nobody else. And we write those rules in stone with mathematics and cryptography, so that the user themselves is the only one that can access them, not some third-party entity. Because we're not taking these files and storing them on some server somewhere and controlling them. No, we're encrypting them locally on the user's computer, and then that's split up into multiple pieces, and then we distribute this all over the globe. And so the user who actually stored that file is the only one who knows how to reconstruct that, and he's the only one who has the encryption keys to that, unlike our more traditional solutions where you drag and drop it, it goes to some application, it goes to some server, and that business or that application or the people who run that application can access those files and those information.
So just to clarify for my audience, there's no way, kind of like your Gmail, where STORJ or anyone can just search words or index your information and then come around and target you like in a marketing aspect. That's not something that STORJ is going to do to you.
Right. Yeah. So you look at some of these other offerings and like Gmail, and they say, okay, we give you all this free space, but how do they make their money? By selling you ads and more targeted ads. And so, yeah, that's not kind of our model. Our model is that the users have complete control of their files, and no one on the outside, including us, can see what those files and that information is.
And the other thing that I saw was the malware. And that's been like a really big thing with the hacks that have been going on with the cloud storage space. How, with the cryptography, I know it's strong and everything like that, but you have like private keys. Is there some embedded aspect of storage that would kind of prevent certain hacks from occurring, or do people still have to secure their private keys?
So there's many questions about the top level user security. So you could make the most secure encrypted system in the world, but if the user puts the username and password on a sticky note and pastes it to their monitor, well, then is that system really secure? Yes. So we're really looking at a bunch of different ways to really make the system secure, but also get the user to pay a little bit more attention to the security, and again, not write down their username and password and put it on their monitor. So we're looking at hardware options where, and this is where I'd really like to go personally, is more hardware options. So the idea is that you have to plug in a physical device, or you can use two-factor through your phone, or these are the kind of options that the industries are tending to, where if a particular thing gets hacked or compromised through malware, say your computer, will you still need some other device, whether it be some kind of USB key or your phone, to get access to that information. And so if one gets compromised, that's all right, because you would have to compromise two separate devices to get access to the information.
So would you see something like a Trezor type of
Yeah, so something like a Trezor or something like an application on your phone. So you just have that second layer of security. And really, I think hardware security is the best way to go, where you can't access this file or information unless you plug in this USB key or this Trezor or this hardware device that has a portion of the encryption keys. So no one can hack into it unless they have that physical device. So they'd have to actually rob you at gunpoint first and take that key.
And so at least something that happened in New York. I don't know if you saw that story.
Yeah, so I mean, majority of attacks, are just people getting some malware in there or guessing the password, that kind of stuff. Unless you have, the top secret codes of the world, I don't think anyone's going to come to your house and rob you at gunpoint for your cat pictures.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the other thing I saw when I was reading both the STORJ paper and the Metatags paper is that you made it very implicit that you guys have built it so you can scale up, particularly with the adding of nodes. And like, for example, if a client had maybe only 2 nodes, they could eventually go to 12 if they choose to.
Mm-hmm.
I like this aspect because while a number of different, like Bitcoin itself is designed to scale up, it wasn't necessarily clear enough in the white paper or clear enough explained to people. Did you see that as personally when you're writing your white paper, looking at how other people have done stuff to make your concept as clear as possible? Or were you just wanting to make sure that the notion's out there and people know what it is you're doing?
Sure. So that was just trying to explain some of the base technical concepts. There's portions of the white paper that are very easy to understand, but there's other portions that require, it assumes that you have some kind of higher computer science knowledge, for example, hashing and Merkle trees, those kinds of things. Yeah, so there's definitely different parts of the white paper that, hey, that makes perfect sense, and then other portions where the average person might be like, oh, okay, what's that? Yeah. So it was kind of a mix, but it's trying to more describe the problem overall and how we solve some of the basic questions.
Okay. And what got you or compelled you to write or come up with the concept of STORJ? Because you have 2 concepts and 2 white papers in a pretty rapid fashion, and that personally impressed me.
Yeah, so it's really 2 things. One was I was storing a bunch of market data from various altcoins, and I was also storing some Twitter data, scraping through Twitter and the live tweets in there, and it was getting to be a lot of information. And I want to kind of store this and publicly and have people be able to go through it and use it. And so I looked at various cloud offerings, and I was like, wait a minute, why is Amazon or Google, like their cloud service offerings, like 2 orders of magnitude over what it would cost me to store this myself? That doesn't make any sense. And starting to do a little bit more research into the cost structures of there. And come to find out that for these services, only 7% is about the cost of the disk. The rest is the maintenance and infrastructure. And so if we can eliminate that through building a network that can do that, well, you can save a lot of money. The other portion was a post by Gregory Maxwell, who's a Bitcoin core developer, who talked about this system he called STORJ. This is where we take the name. And what it was it was a autonomous AI agent where you would give your files to and pay money for it to store your files, and then it would go on the behind the scenes and provide you your files, but also pay for its own storage space. So think of it as, you know, kind of Skynet for your files, where there's no third party to be able to go through or look through your files or do anything of that nature. It's just completely a computer program that runs itself and even pays for its own upkeep. So I thought those two both opened up like a cool aspect in terms of the autonomous AI, but also like a real need and use cases. If we eliminate all of the costs associated with data storage, well, that's a pretty solid business cases, and a lot of people would jump on it for that reason.
Okay. The other thing is, why did you choose to be more decentralized instead of like maybe selling the program or something like that to people?
So there's really two aspects of it. So one is the core protocol of storage, which is really about encrypting the files and the data and using Bitcoin and decentralizing the network. But we really have a portion that sits on top of that, which is STORJ Labs, which is saying, hey, you're a corporation or a business, you'd love to use something like this that is more secure and more private. I mean, you look at what happened to Sony, you look at what happened to Target, all these other large corporations getting their data breached. So you really look at as storage as a better security and privacy solution, but also a lot less cost. If you're an app business or a content business and you're spending 90% of your costs on just storing data with Amazon or moving it around, and something comes around that's two orders of magnitude cheaper, then you really want to use that. So we have STORJ Labs, which is kind of that intermediary that just abstracts all the crypto and Bitcoin away from those core businesses and just provides them with a solution. So we're really doing both. We're both offering a decentralized platform for sharing data and buying and selling data, but we also have kind of this Coinbase or BitPay that sits on top that really provides solutions so people can easily use this platform without really having to know much about it.
And now you've won a couple of different awards, or I should say storage in itself has won a different couple of awards out there as far as startup goes. Have you seen an increase in investment or anyone approaching you and say, hey, come be part of this seed development company and invest money into storage?
Oh yeah, so we've been working on our a fundraising round right now, but definitely we've got a lot more exposure. On top level companies, but also just users themselves when we get various awards for a concept idea or initial applications.
Okay. And how does that for you personally? Something that you have developed and put your hard work and sweat in, and I guess storage has been around maybe like a year and a half, really, and it's just kind of, to me personally, in the crypto space, is kind of blowing up. I mean,
Yeah,
do you imagine this, or you're like, oh, maybe 5 years from now this will happen?
Well, I definitely love the traction and the outreach that it's gotten. Previous to this, I had worked on a tutorial series that got about about 3 million views, I think, last time I checked. So I'm used to like these larger communities, and that's, I think, one reason that our community is so large and so big. We have about 15,000 people signed up for a mailing list and about 1,000 people in Slack. Is just, I knew a few cool tricks about building large groups and getting people around an idea, and so learned that for stuff I did previously, and it's transferred quite nicely to storage. So we have a lot of people helping and supporting us.
Okay, so let's talk about previously. You attended a HUSBU, which is a historically Black college. What made you choose Morehouse, and tell us a little bit about their tech program, which I've heard about before, but I've never known anyone who was a part of it or hurt anyone who's a part of it, really.
Sure, sure. So yeah, I attended Morehouse College. It was really a great opportunity. Gave me a lot of. I mean, I would have probably not got exposure into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and these kinds of ideas if I didn't go there. It was actually a friend of mine who was mining in the early days of 2012, and I said, huh, why don't I do that too? I'm not paying for electricity here in the college housing, so why not just leave it while I'm off on classes and stuff. Believe it or not, I was actually making about half Bitcoin a day back in 2012, which is, I guess, a lot of money in now's prices, even with the drop. So yeah, that just kind of got me down the rabbit hole, and it was definitely a fun opportunity. And it's funny, just me being around there, I got just about everyone in the computer science department to at least have some amount of Bitcoin. And it was definitely a fun ride for me and a bunch of the other people there.
Well, let's talk about that, because you specifically went from your website because of the STEM program. Did you have experience in high school, or were you doing this personally on your own?
So I was doing freelance development in high school, just kind of as a side project. So I've been a developer ever since about junior high. I just got started. Started making websites and small apps and stuff like that. So I've been a developer and playing with programming for quite a long time. So it's kind of obvious that I would go to college for computer science.
Okay. Well, what made you do websites? I mean, in junior high, most kids are either starting a band, joining a sport, or gaming. They're not necessarily building their own websites or developing code. I mean, what was it that compelled you to do something like that?
It was fun for me. I mean, it's just something to do, and you you make something, and oh look, people are actually like looking at it and appreciating and talking about it and those kind of things, and I really like that validation and that visibility. So like I said, I built a tutorial series in high school, and at first it just started as a small little project, but then seeing it, get over 1 million views, and actually I was generating ad revenue from that as well. So it's nice to be, a high school kid and getting a little money in your pocket more than anyone else. So, like, why would I stop this?
Yeah. Okay.
Kind of why not.
And as you've gone further and further in the tech industry, how important do you think like outreach programs or STEM program is, particularly for people of color? Because personally, for me, my experience, I think this is a very exciting time for minority people who before where certain opportunities were not presented for them, but because the internet is everywhere and there's not as many hurdles. How important do you think it is for STEM programs to be in like high school, or these tutorials that you have out there that these kids have this access and they can potentially be, the next level in life, up the economic ladder?
I think these STEM programs need to expand. I think almost high school is getting into a little bit too late. I think you really have to start at the early years and find people who, get exposure to that and really start playing with it at an early age. It's really not that hard to learn at least the basics of programming and some of these other things, and so starting early is the best way to do it. And yeah, traditionally, minorities have not had the resources when it comes to computers and access to the internet. I mean, you're thinking about early 1990s, 1980s, where you could get these very basic computers, but they were thousands and thousands of dollars, and those weren't really accessible to minorities who didn't have a couple $1,000 dollars to just throw on this put it together yourself computer.
I remember my first computer, or the first computer in the house, was like $1,700, and I think it was like maybe 4 gigs. Which is
so it definitely, but now that those barriers have come down, where you can get a Raspberry Pi for, you know, $35, and
Yes.
plus a couple cables, and I mean, what you need, you know, mini USB, and that'll probably come with your phone charger, and, you know, a little screen and a keyboard. You know, you can get a workable computer that someone can program for, you know, under $100 now. So I think it's just getting those resources out there to those kids that, you know, can have that experience and say, hey, you know, this is an area that I'd like to really explore and do something with.
Okay. You said you should think that kids should start earlier. I know a number of different countries are starting as early as elementary school. Do you think it's computing or the aspect of program should be just as basic as learning English and math?
Absolutely. I mean, programming language is a language. I mean, it's got language right in the name. So really getting that at an early stage is important. I mean, it's all about you know, just development in terms of the brain, the way the brain works. If you're learning, you know, multiple languages really early on, it's a lot easier to understand those and really get those in the center of your brain, versus learning that, you know, later on. And so it's the same thing for programming languages. You're learning that very, very early on. You're going to understand some of those basic concepts, you know, as a language, and understand how that works at a very basic level. And so when it comes to, you know, the more harder and complex stuff, at least you have the very basics of thinking logically, and thinking how a computer thinks. And so just getting those basic programs and basic knowledge there at the very beginning, I think is important. And I think learning those concepts has some other outside uses than just programming and building applications. I mean, just the thought process of breaking down a problem into, you know, those kind of steps where you can digest each one is very useful for problem solving and other use cases.
Okay, well, let's speak about problem solving, because an aspect on storage that you have on there is the grade listing, where if I guess you can say a consumer, a person who's going to store their be a store, a person who's going to store other people's information on their hard drive, if they're concerned about, I guess you can say, problematic information, that they could not actually store it. Um, how will that truly work? Do you think people are going to actually use that type of gray listing? Is that going to fracture the network in any way, or because it
So
seems a
yeah,
little,
you have
yeah,
this edge case
yeah,
that you deal with is, you know, what if ISIS wants to put a beheading video on storage?
yes,
And
yeah,
you're you know, for the traditional um, use cases or traditional providers like Dropbox, they would just remove that, and that would be that.
mm-hmm,
But this network is built to be more robust, so that if you put up some, you know, political statement or something like that, that can also be removed. So we found this balance with gray listing. So all the network and all the information in the network is encrypted.
mm-hmm,
So if you encrypt the network, if you encrypt the information before you distribute it, then obviously no one's going to know what that video is. It could be a cat picture, it could be ISIS video, it could be, you know, a copy of Wikipedia. No one's going to know what that information is. Now, the flip side of that is how someone reveals those encryption keys. So if you encrypt that information, you keep it private, then you have 100% right to privacy. No one's going to challenge that. No one's going to remove it. Now, the difference is if you publicly share those decryption keys and those files, and now we know what that content is, well, in that case, we say, okay, we know that's an ISIS beheading video. I know that I'm storing this particular chunk. I do not want to store this particular content, and so I can remove it. But that is up to the user's choice of actually storing that content.
mm-hmm.
And so you can simply opt into certain lists, that you have certain curators to say, hey, I'm completely against storing these kinds of videos, but this portion over here, this activist is saying something or another, I'm completely fine with storing that information. So you just have people who curate lists with specific particular types of content that you can decide, hey, I want to opt in and out of that. But that's only if the information is publicly revealed and you know the decryption keys to those files.
So, for example, like how some people have a shared Dropbox and they might put a video or something like that and put a link where people can go and watch a video. It's pretty much the same similar fashion with these gray lists.
Right.
Okay. And what about the legality of this? Because that is becoming somewhat of an issue in sense with some of these cloud storage places where, for example, you know, there's really no way that the any type of legal body is going to go to you and say, hey, here's a subpoena, or here's a warrant to storage. But could they go to an individual person who may have a fragment of information and do the same thing, even though they don't have the access to that information? I mean,
yeah, so we really have no control over the information on the network. That would defeat the purpose entirely.
Yeah.
But what can be used is this gray listing feature to be compliant in some of those methods. So, for example, if someone puts a copy of The Big Bang Theory or the new Minions movie or something on storage, well, that would go into the gray list for DMCA compliant stuff or movies or copyrighted stuff. So in the case of the United States, you might have a majority of people say, okay, that law applies to me. I don't want to host this copyrighted content. Then you would automatically delete those chunks if they were exposed. On the other side of that, you might have someone who's in Norway or in Russia where those laws don't apply. So they're completely, legally able to and willing to, host that kind of content because their laws allow it. So that gray list just allows you to have those options because it's not all one case, right? People are going to have different opinions. People are going to have different laws and those kinds of things.
Okay. Well, let's talk about this because he also stated that there's going to be people that probably are going to have no question storing whatever type of information, and they could, in fact, incentivize people saying, hey, I have no problem with whatever's on this gray list, so you can send your stuff to me. Is it possible for those individuals as a people to either develop their own company within the storage space, or as individuals say, hey, give me this extra amount of storage and you can store here? I mean, is that something that can be built?
So, I mean, that's just something that would be reflected on the market of storage. So the idea is that there's going to be people who are going to say, hey, I'll take, whatever politically questionable content that you have, and I'll take it and I'll store it because that's fine under my country's law. So they might earn a little bit more, stuff. Or a little bit more money based on that. I mean, you might have, some people who speak out against some government, and that's illegal under some certain countries' jurisdictions. So some people are not going to be able to store it over here, but some other people would be happy to take that content. And so the market and the users kind of will reflect where that content goes. And so it's just an open market. People can buy and sell storage space, and there's multiple different use cases and cases for who stores the data and how they store the data and all these other things. And so we're really just leaving an open system for people to be able to make the choices themselves rather than us making those choices for them.
Okay. And the other thing was, for example, if someone were to have 1 terabyte hard drive, that's pretty big of a drive space, but someone else has like a 5 terabyte drive or decides to put like a farm in of itself to participate within the network. Is it possible where you can have, in essence, like with Bitcoin, you have mining pools where there's a small mining pool, big mining pool, and people might be funneling more to a particular user base? Or do you see this as being so dispersed to where if someone were to even have like an entire warehouse of drives, they're not really, I don't know if say manipulating the network or anything like that, but they're not going to be that big of a player.
So yeah, that's a problem you have with Bitcoin is where you there's incentivization to centralize. So the more miners you can fit in a data warehouse, and you control the power and internet and all those kind of things, then you can get more blocks and more rewards. But that's based on a fixed reward for each block that you mine, or if you're participating in a mining pool. For us, it's a little different because we have the cost aspect. So if I have 1 terabyte, let's say in a college dorm, and some other guy has like a super nice setup in some kind of data center, and he has 5 terabytes or something like that. Well, as a college student, well, I'm not paying for power, electricity, heating, cooling, all that kind of stuff. So all I have to do to compete with them is set my costs lower, and that's something you cannot do in Bitcoin. And so there's a balancing factor in that centralization, where people who already have these existing resources have really no costs to running them, and so they can undercut these large providers who do have to pay for the renting their data center and the electricity and all these other things. So there is a balancing factor that we have that Bitcoin does not.
Okay.
And that is cost.
That is cost. And you don't foresee like the aspect of cost going down with things getting smaller and better, and people using, just like they do with Bitcoin with solar power, or figuring out a way to be cost effective? Or just you think that that's just going to be more on the user end, where if someone does figure that,
we definitely think people, just like Bitcoin, are going to try to squeeze all the cost benefits that they can out of it, using compression and special setups and rigs to use less power and those kinds of things. But that's all to the benefit of the service. If you can do things cheaper, faster, better, that's just better for the user and better for the farmer.
Okay. And where do you see potentially within 5 years of storage existence? I mean, do you see you guys being the de facto player out there, or just one of many that have come to existence? Because you do have some competitors. You have like MadeSafe and other different people coming out of the woodwork, but it just seems like you guys have the more user-friendly and have hit more of your marks than some of these other projects.
Yeah, I think of it more as a multi-solution. I mean, you don't just have, one company out there. You have Apple, and you have Microsoft, and you have Google, and so you have all these large companies. They're sometimes doing a lot of the same things, and everyone's happy. Everyone's still making billions of dollars. So I see it more as a multiplayer space, and I think this is definitely the future for everyone's data. I mean, it's 2 orders of magnitude cheaper. It's a lot more private, a lot more secure. So just basic economics and just the problems arising with more traditional cloud storage, I think, as this technology develops out, it's not a very difficult switch.
Well, it seems that the decentralizing almost everything seems to be where people are moving towards, and some of it seems like a fad thing where people are just kind of jumping on it because it's the new kid on the block. But there seems to be like your project where people are like taking it very seriously. They're working it out. They're solving the issues and problems. Like for example, you've considered the farming aspect. You considered gray listing, the development and encouragement of people and making it as user friendly as possible. I mean, where do you see like the decentralizing of everything? Because you are kind of in essence with storage part of the decentralized movement. I mean, do you see it being the most acceptable thing out there, where it's just kind of like how the internet became something that everybody has? Is this something that you think that everyone's going to do? Or do you think there's going to be too much of a pushback by centralized authorities to protect themselves?
I think it's just more about the rewards and the economics of it. If decentralization is the way to go and the economics speak to it, then that's the way we're going to go. I mean, and I think it does speak to the economics. So if you have a company that's, storing their information with a centralized entity, and then you have something else that comes along that's decentralized that doesn't have all the middlemen because it does it all automatically through the protocol, and it's 2 orders of magnitude cheaper, and it's a lot faster and a lot more secure, it's the obvious next step. If they don't adopt it, their competitor will, and they'll make a lot more money. So I think it's kind of the obvious next steps, because it does solve some of those problems and makes things a lot more efficient and more cost effective. So time will tell. Time will tell.
Okay, well, here's two things, because there's something that came in the news just like earlier this week, and we'll see what will happen, if this is going to be a trend or just an anomaly. But in Chicago, they are going to tax cloud storage companies, as well as something called an amusement tax, where if you're viewing something like a Netflix or HBO Go or something like that, there's going to be a fee that you have to pay, a tax within the city of Chicago, which is mind-boggling to me, that you can have something as an amusement tax. But creativity of government, I guess. But the cloud storage aspect of the tax, I guess you can say, is something that could possibly come. Would that something that would fit within the storage system? Is it possible? Because again, just with Bitcoin, people are trying to regulate this new phenomena, with either that in Europe or a sales tax of some sort. You see that potentially happening to storage or similar companies like yourself?
I think there's definitely a push for many companies and counties where not to have more control over digital data. And really, it's just they want their cut.
Yes.
So if people are not going to movie theaters anymore because they're watching online, then they're not getting as much money as they used to. So they're trying to make the case that, well, if you watch the Netflix online, we should get some money from that. I think it's completely insane, but like you said, they'll always think of creative ways to tax you and do all kinds of stuff. We just don't have those capabilities in our system. If it needs be, then we'll just say, hey, you can't use storage in Chicago. Good luck. With crazy laws. Yeah, there's no way to do that in our system, and like I said, we don't have control of it, so we couldn't even impose that if we wanted to.
Okay. And do you see maybe even because storage does have a coin, like a tax in the coin, just in a similar fashion as Bitcoin, or do you consider storage more of a token than a coin?
It's a mixture of both. I mean, it's a token that you need to access and use the software. So that's its really primary use case. And then secondary to that is buying and selling storage space with that token. So it's still up in the air. We have some definites in terms of use of the coins, but that might expand or detract as we build out the network.
Okay. And what is the next step for storage? I know you guys are in test B, or are you about to start test B? The test B group?
Yeah, so our main focus right now is test group B. I've been cranking away at that, actually. I was couldn't right up until we did this interview. So we're working on just figuring out the capacity in the network. So putting some of our initial algorithms out there, getting some feedback and numbers on how fast they work at scale. So we know how fast they work locally, but what does that look like in real life? What does that look like when you have a real network with real people with many, many, many different computers, and what problems come up and what things work? You can have the best idea in the world, and then you put it out there and you find, oh, well, that's not the easiest idea in the world.
So you, in essence, trying to break your baby to make it better.
Right.
Anyway.
Okay. So you take the idea, you put it in the ring against Mike Tyson, and see if it can survive. And if it can do that, yeah, then it can survive and.
Or see if the system is designed to cheat you, and Mike Tyson wins no matter what, like in Punch Out.
Yeah, you don't want Mike Tyson biting into your hard drive now.
No, you do not. And how long do you foresee Test B working out? I mean, do you project if things kind of go according to plan to where towards the end of the year, do you think storage will be out there as a product?
I'm just doing it by the data. I mean,
Okay.
these blockchain projects, everyone tries to say, "Oh yeah, it'll be done in 2 weeks," and 2 years later, I mean, just about every single blockchain project has overshot their data, their timelines.
The George R. R. Martinus all the time.
Yeah. So we'll just say we're working on it. If you actually want to know dates and timelines and how we're doing, just go on our Slack channel and see the developer updates and see us hit milestones. And hey, help out if you want things to go faster. So we don't like to promise any magical dates because things work and you save a month, and things don't work and you lose that month again. So. It's just best if people are really curious of what's going on, just join our Slack channel and ask with real time updates and actually see the dev logs and the commits flying by.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you want to share with our audience before I let you go, Shawn?
I just encourage people to go to storj.io, STORJ.io, sign up for our mailing list. We send those out about once, twice monthly. Just give people updates on the project and give people early access to certain things. Join our Slack channel. There's a link to that on that page as well, so you can talk to me and everyone else on the team. And just look out for us. That's all I'd suggest.
And if anyone is actually really excited about this project, it's only 10,000 storage coin or storage X coin to participate. You can always go to shapeshift.io and you could, exchange out whatever extra cryptocurrency coins you have out there. And just, this is another project you can test out. I mean, you can help and participate and get this going. I mean, everyone talks about being part of a decentralized system, and it's a great idea. This is a way for you to start from the ground up and make, put your money where your mouth is.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Any other questions for me?
I think you pretty much covered everything for me. Like I said, you're probably one of the most exciting developers I've seen out there. I see you, talking about this space on different, video channels, vlogs, and podcasts. And the fact that you have not only one but two white papers out there, that this project versus some of the other blockchain projects has pretty much met its goal. I mean, I'm just very impressed, and I want this to work because I think we need a decentralized cloud service. Because for me personally, I would love not to use stuff like Dropbox or Cloud, or Google Drive or any of those type of places. I would love to be able to have a secure information space instead of my old 1 terabyte hard drive that I have to plug and unplug all the time.
Absolutely, definitely fits a need. Thanks for the compliment.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing this project. Again, everyone, this is Shawn Wilkinson of STORJ. It's a very exciting project. Everything's going to be in the show notes. I encourage you to really, really check out this site. This is one of the blockchain projects out there that I believe is actually going to go. So thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you taking your time out of your day to speak with us, and thank you.
Absolutely, to the moon.
To the moon, everybody.